Following the 2013 NBA season, the Philadelphia 76ers decided to go in a different direction and fully rebuild, and this became known as the process. But what if I told you, 8 years later the process rebuild has been completed, but it can also be argued that it has been a failure of an experiment, as the 76ers franchise faces multiple decisions involving their uncertain future. This is the story of the process by the 76ers. But first, I have to take you back to where it all started. The night of the 2013 NBA Draft. Following a disappointing 2012-13 season, where the 76ers finished 34-48 and missed the playoffs, newly appointed GM Sam Hinkie wanted to tear the team down and start over. And during the 2013 NBA Draft, the Sixers agreed to trade 2013 All-Star Jrue Holiday and the 42nd overall pick, Pierre Jackson, to the New Orleans Pelicans for Nerlens Noel and the Pelicans' first-round pick in 2014. The young guard, Jrue Holiday, who had just made his first All-Star appearance, was the first domino to fall in this historic rebuild. The 76ers used the 11th overall pick in the draft to take Holiday's replacement, Markel Fultz from Syracuse, who was set to be the team's centerpiece for at least the next few seasons. Going into the 2013-14 season, the 76ers let most of the players from their previous team walk in free agency and only had 6 of the 15 players from the prior year on the roster by January 1st, 2014. And during the 2014 trade deadline, they also traded away veterans Spencer Hawes, Evan Turner, and Lavoy Allen, who at the time were all key rotational pieces. The rebuild and tank was officially on, as the 76ers had a franchise record with 26 consecutive losses throughout the season, which then tied the NBA record for longest losing streak in a single season. And the 76ers finished the 2014 season with a 19-63 record, and surprisingly did not have the worst record in the NBA, as the Bucks finished with 4 less wins. Michael Carter-Williams did win the 2014 NBA Rookie of the Year award, and some would say that this was the best season of his entire career and that he peaked as a rookie. The first season of the Tankathon in Philly was over. Entering the 2014 NBA Draft, the Sixers held the 3rd pick, and they used it to draft a 7-foot center out of Cameroon, who would later become the franchise's centerpiece. And at number 3, they drafted Joel Embiid.
With the 3rd pick in the 2014 NBA Draft, the Philadelphia 76ers select Joel Embiid from Yaoundé, Cameroon, and the University of Kansas.
They also traded for the draft rights of the 12th overall pick, Dario Saric, who was a draft and stash player who spent 2 more years overseas before eventually making his debut in 2016. During the 2014 offseason, the 76ers traded Thaddeus Young to the Timberwolves in the trade that sent Kevin Love to the Cavs. And this trade made it so that the 76ers had only 2 players with 3 or more years of NBA experience still on the roster. Joel Embiid would not make an immediate impact for the Sixers, as he would miss the entire 2014-15 season due to a foot injury, meaning the 76ers would continue to tank throughout that season. And they started the season with an insane 0-17 record before finally winning their first game in early December. The team also signed future fan favorites Robert Covington and TJ McConnell, as Hinkie refused to sign veteran players that would help them win games, and instead searched for undrafted players with something to prove. And during the 2015 trade deadline, the Sixers traded away reigning Rookie of the Year winner Michael Carter-Williams to the Milwaukee Bucks in a 3-team trade, and in return they received JaVale McGee, Isaiah Canaan, and 3 draft picks. Sam Hinkie got a lot of backlash for this deal, but it turned out to be a good one, as just like I've mentioned previously, MCW's rookie season ended up being his best and where he peaked. The Sixers were clearly focused on gathering more future assets as the franchise continued to move in a different direction. And they finished the 2014-15 season with an 18-64 record, which was the 3rd worst in the league, meaning that they had the 3rd best odds to land the number 1 pick in the 2015 draft. But they did stay where they were expected to and were awarded the 3rd overall pick, which they then used to draft Jahlil Okafor, who, looking back on it now, was pretty much a bust for the 3rd pick, but still ended up being a decent NBA player, but some say he just doesn't fit into this era of the league. And during the 2015-16 season, the Sixers were once again looking to tank, and unfortunately Joel Embiid missed another season due to the same foot injury, and many started to question whether or not Joel would be a bust due to health concerns. In December 2015, the league recommended that Jerry Colangelo was hired to help the Sixers transition from tanking to winning, but he and Hinkie were not working together, and he tried to hire new staff behind Hinkie's back. And on April 6, 2016, Sam Hinkie officially resigned from his duties with the Sixers, meaning that the man behind the process was gone, and the team would continue to rebuild without him. The next day, Jerry Colangelo hired his son Brian to be Hinkie's replacement as president of basketball operations. And the 76ers finished the 2016 season with a terrible 10-72 record, which was the third worst regular season in NBA history, behind just the 2012 Bobcats and the 1973 Sixers, and entered the draft lottery with obviously the best odds to land the number one pick, and they did in fact win the lottery. And with the first pick in the 2016 NBA draft, they selected a power forward / point guard out of LSU named Ben Simmons.
With the first pick in the 2016 NBA draft, the Philadelphia 76ers select Ben Simmons from Melbourne, Australia, and Louisiana State University.
Entering the 2016-17 season, Embiid and Saric were set to make their NBA debuts, and Joel made an immediate impact and was playing phenomenal in a low number of minutes per game. Unfortunately, he injured his knee 31 games into the season and was done for the year. Simmons also missed the entire season with a foot injury of his own, and with all of this in mind, the rebuild continued in Philly. The Sixers traded Nerlens Noel at the deadline, with Joel Embiid clearly being the starting center for the future, and Dario Saric finished as the 2017 Rookie of the Year runner-up, with Joel placing third. And the 76ers finished the season with a 28-54 record, and were set to have the third overall pick in the 2017 NBA draft, but they instead traded up to number 1 with the Celtics to draft point guard Markel Fultz.
With the first pick in the 2017 NBA draft, the Philadelphia 76ers select Markel Fultz from the University of Washington.
Unfortunately, Markel also struggled with injuries and played in just 14 games during his rookie season, as he had an issue with his shoulder that ruined his shooting form and ability, and many people questioned what had happened to him. But on the bright side for the Sixers, playoff basketball finally made a return to Philadelphia, and they finished the 2017-18 season with a 52-30 record and were the 3 seed, and were set to be matched up against the Miami Heat in round 1. The Sixers ended up winning the series in a quick 5 games, and were forced to play the Boston Celtics in the second round. And they lost that series also in 5 games, and were sent home for the summer. But it could be considered to be a victory season for the franchise, as the young roster got a taste of playoff basketball and actually won a playoff series. Following the season, Brian Colangelo and the Sixers parted ways after a controversy involving fake burner Twitter accounts, and they then promoted Elton Brand to be the team's next general manager a few months later. And he made a win-now move, and on November 12th, he traded Saric, Covington, Jared Bayless, and a 2022 second-round pick to the Minnesota Timberwolves for Jimmy Butler and Justin Patton. With this trade, the 76ers added another star to the roster and were focused on getting the team better. But they weren't done quite yet, as on February 6th, 2019, they made a trade with the Clippers that sent Wilson Chandler, Mike Muscala, Landry Shamet, 2 first-round picks, and 2 second-rounders to Los Angeles for Tobias Harris, Boban Marjanovic, and Mike Scott. And then very next day, they traded Markel Fultz to the Orlando Magic for Jonathan Simmons, a first and a second-round pick, whose value plummeted after his short rookie season. The 76ers were all in for the 2019 season, considering both Butler and Harris were set to be unrestricted free agents following that season. The team had one of the best starting lineups in the league, with Ben Simmons, JJ Redick, Jimmy Butler, Tobias Harris, and Joel Embiid. And they finished the 2018-19 regular season with a 51-31 record, and were once again the 3 seed in the Eastern Conference, where they were matched up against the Brooklyn Nets in round 1, and they won that series 4 games to 1 to set up a second round matchup against the Toronto Raptors. And this series went the distance to Game 7, where with the game tied late, Raptors superstar Kawhi Leonard was about to make history. And he had a buzzer-beating mid-range jumper while falling out of bounds that ended the series and the 76ers' hopes of a title in 2019. It is considered one of the craziest shots in postseason history, and it was a heartbreaking loss for the Sixers and the city of Philadelphia. In the offseason, Jimmy Butler left for the Miami Heat via a sign-and trade that brought Josh Richardson to Philly, and Tobias Harris did agree to return to the team on a 5-year deal, and Al Horford was also brought onto the squad. The Sixers entered the 2019-20 season with the goal of getting over the hump and making it to the conference finals. The season was put on hold in March 2020 due to COVID-19 and was resumed a few months later in a bubble-like environment in Walt Disney World. The 76ers finished the season with a 43-30 record and qualified for the playoffs as the 6th seed, and were set to face off with the Boston Celtics in round 1. Unfortunately, Ben Simmons would miss the entire series due to a knee injury, and the Sixers were eliminated from the playoffs after being swept in 4 games by the Celtics, and head coach Brett Brown was fired following the season, and was replaced by former Clippers head coach Doc Rivers. Entering 2020-2021, Daryl Morey, formerly of the Rockets, was hired to be their president of basketball operations and were continuing their hunt for a title. They didn't make too many changes to their roster throughout the season, and Joel Embiid was an MVP candidate in a season where he led the team purely through big man dominance. They finished the shortened 72-game season with a 49-23 record and were the 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. During their first round series against the Washington Wizards, Joel Embiid left early in Game 4 with a knee injury that was later announced to be a partially torn meniscus, and he then missed a series clinching Game 5 as well. In the second round, they were matched up against Trae Young and the inexperienced Atlanta Hawks, where they ended up losing the series in a well-fought 7-game series, one in which they were heavily favored. A lot of the blame for the loss fell on Ben Simmons, who had a poor playoff run, but I personally believe that Doc Rivers is just as much to blame, if not more, due to his lack of making adjustments and history of blowing leads and losing series that he should be winning. This pretty much leads us to the current day, and you're probably wondering what I mean by the process is coming to an end. Well, since their early playoff exit, Ben Simmons has been rumored to be on the trade block, but there is a pretty big difference between what the Sixers believe his value is and what everyone else around the league thinks he's worth. The 76ers recently turned down a rumored trade that would have sent Simmons to Indiana for Malcolm Brogdon and a first-round pick. There have also been reports that Ben Simmons is not willing to report to training camp and will gladly pay any fines he receives by not reporting and wants to move on. So what does that mean for the process? Well, it's obviously now complete as they are consistent championship contenders, but I would argue that it has been a failed experiment as the team hasn't made it to a single conference finals and has traded away all their top picks that they tanked for except for Embiid and Simmons, but it seems like he'll be out the door too in the near future. They've also had 4 different front office staff in charge since the rebuild started, and their tanking forced the league to change the lottery odds so that now the 3 worst teams in the league all have equal chance to land the first pick. The process changed the league, but has so far brought 0 success to Philly, and multiple trades and free agency signings that have seemed to have been out of pure desperation. And this has been the complete story of the process rebuild for the 76ers. Hope you did enjoy it. Thanks so much for watching.